Hey everyone, what's going on? It's the Beard Bro, and welcome to episode 2 of the Brew House. Joining me today, I actually sat down with Bradley Riggs of Hawk Moth Brewing and Bike Rack Brewing most recently. I'll let him tell his story in this, but it's a pretty cool story how he got started at a brewery here in Rogers and then eventually launched his own a very, very short time later. So without further ado, here is episode 2 of the Brew House featuring Bradley Riggs.
Live from the rolling hills of Northwest Arkansas, it's the show for beer lovers, beer makers, and most of all, beer drinkers. We're pouring up the best in beer podcasting, straight from the mouths of today's top brewers to your thirsty ears. Get ready to hear how they're pouring their heart and soul into making the best pint possible. This is the Brew House.
Well, so welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here on the Brew House, and I tell you what, we've known each other for a while now, but yeah, I mean, the folks listening don't, so we'll just delve into a little bit about who Bradley is here, man.
Okay, so let's see. My name is Bradley Riggs. I have lived in Benton County, Arkansas my entire life. I am a local through and through, so as far as my beer journey goes, I worked in the distributor world for a few years, bartending before that, and then went to go work for New Province in Rogers. Ran their sales team for about a year and a half, did some experimental pilot batches, homebrewing the whole time while I was doing that, kind of diving into the weird, unexplored beers of our market. In a previous life, I traveled a lot and fell in love with craft beer in all these small towns. So I said, wow, why is no one brewing these cool, French table beers and all this stuff in Northwest Arkansas? And I kind of had a passion for off-the-wall beer. So I opened Hawk Moth about 3.5 years ago in downtown Rogers. Very small batch, barrel-focused brewery. And then kept evolving in this beer industry journey. Ended up forming a legal merger with Bike Rack Brewing here in Bentonville, which is where we're at today.
Dang, man.
That went legal by documentation on January 1 of 2021. What year are we in? What year was last year?
22. Yeah.
So January 1 of 21. So for the last little under 18 months, I've been running operations of both places and have a fancy title of CEO now. So
it's pretty impressive, right? So
okay, you guys are all caught up.
Traveling sales guy to that. So okay, all right. That's the podcast, guys. That's it. Game over.
That's all I got, actually. I got it all out of the way for the opening spill, and I'll be silent for the next 45 minutes.
2.5 minutes in, we're good.
Covered it.
No, so let's go back really quick. So you were talking about you started out at New Province. What led you there? I mean, was it just the sales job, or kind of what?
Okay, so
what got you in?
I mean,
I know Derek's over there, right?
There's always a story to every chapter. I was actually working at Arkansas craft-focused beer distributor in Northwest Arkansas for the year and a half before that. New Province had almost been open for a year and decided they wanted to start distributing. I knew Derek, the owner, pretty well, and I knew Court Castleberry, their head brewer, really well. And ultimately, Court is what I was drawn to. He was the magnet in the business of, I want to go work with this guy. I think he's brewing really great stuff. He has a true passion for simply making good beer.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be a part of that in Rogers. It's 6 minutes from my house. And so I applied for that sales job, got it, and ran with it. We grew as a company from probably from 400 barrels to 1,400 barrels in a calendar year. And
I'm sorry, say those numbers again.
I think we brewed I showed up at like 11 months into the business being open. So they were very young, and maybe my numbers are wrong. If Derek or Cord, if they listen to this, please correct me. But I think in the first year, they were on pace for like 400 or 500 barrels, and most of that was in-house sales. They weren't really distributing anything, very, very little. And by the end of year 2, we were over 1,000 barrels, I think over 1,400 barrels with I'm going to say 60-70% of that was in distro in the market. So we had over 100 accounts between Benton and Washington County. And it was really satisfying, but it was a lot of physical labor. I was the one selling the keg and then slinging the keg.
Okay.
And, I don't know. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment because I said, cool, I don't like this aspect, so I'm going to open my own brewery so I can do all of the aspects.
Yeah. They say, you'll work 40, 50 hours a week and then you become an entrepreneur and you just won't stop working.
Yeah, you quit counting the time.
Yeah.
Time is just sun up and sun down.
Yep.
So what can I accomplish when the sun's up, and what can I continue to accomplish when the sun is down?
Exactly.
that's how the days work.
Yeah.
But I think I had a fear of boredom possibly in opening Hawk Moth and then running that for a year and a half. COVID shows up. Everyone's kind of sitting around saying, what do we do? I hadn't had any downtime in years. Mentally, I hadn't had any downtime. And so the merger talk started, and I think I was just bored enough to say, yeah, let's take on another brewery.
Yeah, right.
And I love the ownership team of Bike Rack, so they brought me in to be an owner-operator. And
that's so cool.
Fear of boredom, gone.
Yeah.
Crushed it.
Yeah, no worries are there.
No worries.
So what was it, how was it received? I know whenever if you're working at a brewery and you go up to your boss and be like, hey dude, I love your beer, but here's the deal. I'm going to make my own. Mm-hmm. Deuces.
Yeah.
How was that received?
Okay. So with the new province, again, I went to go work for an owner that I knew and I liked. That helped a lot. Mm-hmm. And even whenever I interviewed for the sales job, I mentioned, I would like to open my own brewery at some point. I didn't put a timeline on it. I didn't know a timeline. Once I started, it is funny how timing works. It's almost like dating. As soon as you stop looking to date, you find a girl that you got to start dating right then and there.
Yeah. And then I married her, and her name's Elsie.
Right? That's there's something to that energy in the universe that we're drawn to. So 3 weeks after I had started my job, I met who ended up becoming my two investors of Hawkmoth. Okay. 3 weeks after that. So I had no timeline, and it went from getting hired to 3 months in, working on a business plan saying, yeah, probably in the next year.
Wow.
So
what you're saying is you're not a procrastinator.
No, I'm overly eager. Again, back to the whole fear of boredom. I can't allow any boredom to ever set in.
Yeah.
Maybe there's some ADD in that actually, but
I feel like I identify very well with that. Yeah, that's very accurate.
So it had been almost a year once the business plan got serious enough. I was trying to go get loans from banks and things, and sat down with Derek and said, hey, so I had mentioned that I wanted to open a brewery. Mm-hmm. Well, that timeline is, in my mind, at least a year ahead of schedule. I think it's going to be this year that we're going to open a brewery, but I'm probably going to do it in Bentonville. So, you guys in Ozark can continue to dominate downtown Rogers, and I'll continue to be a big fan of your brand. I'll do my job all good because it's the same account buyers. You got to stay close friends with everyone.
Yeah. It is a small community here.
And so from January to March, only about 60 days, I went from, I'm going to open this in Bentonville to, hey, Derek, I signed a lease in downtown Rogers. It's like 4 minutes down the road. And he's like, man, all good. Like, we have our place. You're going to earn your place. Yeah. And there's plenty more room for craft beer in the market. And I loved that mentality because that was how I felt about it. And it was nice to hear him say that. And we have continued to be very close friends, through me leaving. I brought in my replacement and trained him and was still in their back of house every week before the brewery was open, just hanging out with Court, tasting stuff, trying stuff. We stayed close over that summer as I was opening Hawkmoth.
Yeah. Was there any, as you guys were brewing there at New Province, was there a specific beer that just jumped out at that you were like, hey, that was the catalyst for like, I could be crazier with this beer, or I could do something. This is a great base, but how do I grow it?
Yeah. Not necessarily inspiring to like my style. But the first beer that I was like, Court, you're a genius. No one's doing anything like this, was his like orange cream ale.
Okay.
And
I had that one.
he was able to show me that like just peeling oranges, just getting the oils from the skin was enough to translate in whatever volume of beer you needed. And I had never thought about how strong citrus zest is in beer. I think we were doing like 30 barrels with 30 oranges. It wasn't very much, and it was translating. And again, if Court's listening, my ratios may be off, but I remember being blown
He's like,
away.
No, don't worry about it. You can throw everybody else off. Like,
how few oranges we were using and how strong of the orange flavor we were getting. The citrus oils were awesome. Yeah.
So you use real oranges there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It would have been their second anniversary, or no, was it the first anniversary? Yeah, we did a Saison on orange pills.
Yeah.
So I had been there just for a month or two and was blown away by how much orange flavor we got in the beer just from sitting around with sanitized gloves, peeling oranges.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that kind of opened my eyes to sometimes the best things are the simplest things. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah, absolutely. So you went on, you left New Providence, you moved over to your own brewery then, so Hawkmoth.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it was right at the beginning of the pandemic, really. I mean,
okay. So
yeah, how'd that go?
It certainly wasn't in the projections or the business plan. We opened in September of 2018.
Okay.
Then the pandemic hits in March of 2020. And by the time we got to our third anniversary, so September of 21,
okay,
it was the week of, and someone said, "Hey, you and Ivory Bill, who opened the same week that we did in Silent Springs, you guys have been open longer post-pandemic than pre-pandemic."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What the heck? I don't view life like that." It was a strange realization of, oh yeah, our entire business survival. We've done COVID longer than pre-COVID.
Yeah.
But it almost gave you the sense of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Absolutely.
So powering through 2020, powering through 2021, going into 2022, which is where we're at now, I think we feel stronger than ever from both brands, Hawk Moth and Bike Rack standpoint.
That's cool. What do you remember? What was the first beer you brewed over at Hawk Moth?
Yes, I do know because it's a story. Back to my whole strange beers is my interest. The first homebrew beer I ever made, I mean, at all. The first whole, like, all grain homebrew beer was a Beer to Guard.
Okay.
That's not normal, but I thought it gave fermentation the best chance to not worry so much about the exact temp.
Yeah. Explain to listeners what's a Beer to Guard in case they're not familiar.
Beer to Guard, by what my take was on it, was an amber-focused Saison. So think a French-style amber with a decent hop presence. You want 20 to 30 IBUs to kind of give it more of that preservative, stable base. But the alcohol isn't crazy, probably between 6 and 7. So not really a table beer, but certainly not an imperial beer. Just it was appropriately named somewhere in between, as it is a catch-all style of beers.
Okay.
So I just knew that I wanted the fermentation temp to be able to get a little wild, as I didn't have, conicals or anything in my.
Yeah. So you would have some fluctuation for sure. Yeah.
So I wanted to start with that. So then, speed up 4 years. I'm getting to brewing my first beer at Hawk Moth. I had to brew a Beer to Guard.
Yeah.
I had to complete that full circle journey of brew something that you're so confident in brewing as you break in the system and learn about the system, because every system I've ever brewed on is different. It's just how it goes. But brew something that is somewhere in between all of these other styles. So I brewed that beer for a couple of years. I currently don't brew it anymore, but it ran its course and had its time to shine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So now, if I'm correct in my timing there, have you just been, like, at that point, had you just been home brewing for 4 years, or were you home brewing a little bit before the Beer to Guard?
as far as homebrewing before that, it would have been with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. As far as solo homebrewing, about 4 years.
Okay.
In the 2 years leading up to signing the dotted line on my loans for Hawkmoth, I did about 200 homebrews. So I was doing about one a week for 2 straight years. It was a lot of data. You know, I was doing it just for the research purposes. A lot of times I would brew a beer, and once you get in that rotation, you're having a new keg every week. Yeah. So I was inviting people over to my house every weekend just so we could crush the keg. So I had the keg to fill back up for the next beer the following week. It was a lot of really good trial and error.
Suddenly I'm sad that I didn't know you then.
Yeah. That was those backyard patio hangs were a lot of fun.
The beer wasn't the only thing hazy, right? So
it's true.
Hey, so that's really fascinating, because I think when I think of brewers that start their own business, it's all over the map, really. I mean, from any of the stories that I've heard from folks, maybe some people have been brewing for the better part of a decade, and they wouldn't even think of opening a brewery. But then some people, they do their first home brew, and then they're like, okay, how can I do this for 6 more months, and then jump right in? Mm-hmm. And so I think 4 years, I think that's pretty good, a pretty solid base.
Yeah, and the thing is, in the last 4 years of professional brewing, I've learned so much, and 4 years from now, I'm going to know so much more. I mean, that's a huge chunk of time to absorb knowledge. So
absolutely,
I would say, if you can brew for 4, 8, 12 years before you do it pro, that's going to be even better.
Yeah. Well, it's going to make you guessing less and more confident with every move that you make.
Because at the end of the day, you can read a whole bunch of stuff online about whatever you're doing, but until you actually do it, you don't 100% know how it reacts to whatever combination you're using. But I wanted to open a brewery before I was 30, so that was the goal.
Mission accomplished,
Mission
right?
accomplished.
Check that box.
Signed my loans at 29 and a half. So.
Yeah. So now, how are things looking for Hawkmoth right now? I mean, you guys trending upward, I would assume.
Yes, thank you for assuming that.
I do, because I've had your beer and it's delicious. So I'm always surprised and always intrigued by the flavors you put out, because it's never something I'm expecting.
Yeah.
And also your naming is fantastic as well. So, well done on that. But I would just think, like, I would assume it's trending upward for you. Are you staying there in downtown Rogers, or are you kind of like,
I got
looking at expanding?
Plenty of good info for you. So,
and the funny part is, we didn't talk about this ahead of time, so I just sprung that on you.
We did not, but I'll let you in on some secrets.
Ooh, I like secrets.
So, as I was brewing Beer to Guards 4 years ago when I first opened, I was adamantly saying, I'm not going to brew a pale ale. Not because I don't like pale ales. I personally drink a lot of pale ales. Yeah. My whole thing was, as Derek kind of showed me love whenever I left New Province, of, hey man, it's fine. Like, this market can handle more good craft beer. I kind of took that of, hey guys, there's a brewery 5 blocks away called Ozark who brews a really good pale ale. And I don't want to brew a pale ale just to say I also brew a pale ale like Ozark. I want Ozark to continue to brew that pale ale, and pale ale drinkers, buy that beer and drink that beer. I'm going to keep buying and drinking that beer. Fast forward 2 years, I hire a new assistant brewer and start getting him trained on the creative side, and he wants to brew a pale ale. And I was like, man, Hawkmoth's really been set on never brewing a pale ale. So we gave in to do a pale ale, and you're commenting on, you like our names. We appropriately decided to name it Change of Plans.
Okay.
As, hey, sometimes in life, there's just a change of plans. So pale ale just came out a few weeks ago, and it's called Change of Plans.
Okay.
Very appropriate. Took me over 3 years, but I did end up making a juicy pale ale in the end. Expansion. Production-wise, I'm really happy with kind of having my hands on the product as detailed as I do. We only make about 3, maybe max ceiling 400 barrels of beer a year with the Hawk Moth brand. But we are opening a new beer bar, a Hawk Moth themed beer bar in downtown Bentonville.
Really?
Yeah. So
fantastic.
It's going to be called The Beacon.
Okay.
And it's kind of riffing off of the the fact that moths are drawn to light. So
Okay.
we'll have the production facility in downtown Rogers, and then we'll have a whole separate themed beer bar in downtown Bentonville that's very light oriented. And we kind of wanted to sum up where I'm at in my production creative journey with Bike Rack as well. So you can imagine the moth being drawn to the light, or you can imagine like an old school headlight on a bicycle. Like whenever you pedal, it lights up. And we wanted to get both of those creative vibes and smash them into one. So
That's cool.
the beacon is coming very soon, probably late spring.
So now that's exciting because I had no idea about that one.
Yeah.
And I think that, we've actually got, I think that's going to play very nicely into, total spoiler alert. There's actually an announcement coming on next week's episode that I may have already recorded.
Okay.
But you guys are going to want to stick around for that one too, because Bentonville is shifting and growing. And I think that's going to play very nicely to what's getting ready to be announced next week. So
cool.
But so really quick, let's talk Hawkmoth. I know the story, but tell everybody about what made you name a brewery Hawkmoth Brewery? Because I don't think about
super
moths
strange
and beer. You know?
Yeah. So my wife and I took our honeymoon to Portland, Maine, and if you've never been, it is a beer mecca. It is a utopia of vibes and quality beer and quality food. And so we went there right as we started working on our business plan. So our creative vibes were at an all-time high. We were really trying to crank out things. And we did not have a brand established at that point. I knew that I didn't want it to be the name of the area, the town, or my last name. Yeah. And that works for a lot of breweries. I'm not saying that's a negative thing, but I wanted something really off the wall to kind of match the creative side of the liquid of the beer. Okay. So she, out of nowhere, threw out like, hey, what if we called it Hawkmoth? And I was like, that's super strange. I don't like that.
What are you, hipster?
And I don't know, like 2 weeks passed probably, and we just got home, and I went to work and came home, and I was like, why can I not stop thinking about the name Hawkmoth?
Okay.
You're going to have to tell me where you came up with that. I didn't give you a chance to explain it. I just like cut it off because I thought it was too weird. And she said, oh, I was reading about these moths, these giant moths. They're native to Central and South America, and kind of over time they have been slowly migrating north, and they don't really migrate any farther north than the Ozarks. So in the southern climate, they'll get up to like 9 inches in wingspan. Okay. We're talking straight up birds at that point, right? Yeah. But in this climate, they'll get to 4 inches pretty easily, which is still a huge freaking moth.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're concerned, like your only thing to contrast that with is like the little ones that you see buzzing around your.
Whenever you see a 4-inch moth, it stands out to you.
Yeah.
It's also kind of one of those things. It's been like whenever you buy a new car, you suddenly see that new car everywhere. Yeah. I don't know what that is called, but I've started noticing moths all the time over the last 3 years, and people will send me pictures all the time. Like, is this a hawk moth on my back patio? So they are heavily in the Ozarks. Okay. If you just open your eyes.
If you had a random percentage to throw out right now, how accurate are people in identifying that's a hawk moth?
The most common misconception are Luna moths. Luna moths are pretty popular and are not hawk moths.
Okay.
But with that being said, hawk moths have like 2,000 different types of species. It's rare that unless you're seeing the same one, you'll never see the same species again.
Really?
And so I loved that let's brew all these one-off beers, and once they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah.
I loved that correlation. But what I really loved was kind of creating a story from the interesting details of their story of how many people do you know that have moved to Northwest Arkansas in the last decade. They get here, they stay here, and they love the quality of life, so they're never leaving. And this area just keeps growing, fastest growing area in the nation.
Yeah.
And I loved that correlation of we all think that we're just going to keep traveling somewhere until we get home. And when we're home, and when you know it, you know it. So I said, okay, Hawkmoth is so weird. I think it works. Like it's so strange. It gets stuck in your head, and once you experience the beer and the branding and that whole culture, it's with you. It's not going to be easily forgotten. So we wanted a brand that was as creative as the beer itself.
Yeah.
And I think Hawkmoth is that.
I think it absolutely nails it, and I love the way you kind of correlated that between not only the beers that you have and release, and they are here and gone. So like there's some beers you will never see again at Hawkmoth.
Yeah.
There's some that you try to imitate or recreate over a different kind, but and I think that does relate very well to what we have here in Northwest Arkansas going on, because I mean, the last I heard, it was like 55 people a day moving to Northwest Arkansas. And I know the numbers are higher than that now.
Yeah. I think we're on a 10-year trend that Bentonville's population, not NWA's population, but Bentonville's population is going to be 500,000 people.
It's going to be insane around here.
And for reference, right now we're at like 60. So we're talking 10 times growth in 10 years. No other markets are doing that. It is fun to be a part of and kind of watch it as a true local. I've been here when it was all fields, and there's a whole lot less fields now.
If you can say that line, you are officially old, just so you know.
Ah, man, I have.
Way to go.
I guess I never felt old until I hit 30. And 30, I don't feel as old, but I was trying to think back. Whenever I was a little kid, what age did I think was old?
Yeah.
If I'm a 7-year-old, I have a 7-year-old, and so I just asked her this, like, what age do you think is old? Well, I mean, 30 is that age. And I forgot about my mindset as a child until I was 30 and was like, oh man, I think this is the old age. And obviously I'm saying, no, I'm 30. I don't feel old.
I'm just getting going.
Old must be 40 actually.
Yeah.
But I'm sure I'll say it's 50 whenever I'm 40, but 30 was a big number. 30 is definitely saying your 20s are behind you.
Game over, move on.
It's time to grow up.
Oh, very cool. Well, so then you've got Hawkmoth going. You're still doing it right now.
Yes.
But somewhere along the way, somebody else took notice of you and said, "Hey, we have some great beers brewing here in our own brewery. But how did it come about that you got involved with Bike Rack Brewing, where we're actually recording at Bike Rack today? So if you hear any, thuds or anything like that, they're actually, what is that, canning back there?
Yeah.
So like you hear that. I don't know if you hear it in the background, but I'm going to try to edit most of that out. But
It's authentic sound though.
Hey, this is brewery life, man. I'm loving it. And so we're here at Bike Rack right now, but the question is like, how did that come about that you became a part of this family as well?
Yeah, so kind of their operations manager / CFO, all their financial dealings. I knew that guy super well. I've known him his name's Brandon. I've known him for longer than half of my life probably. He's probably my oldest friend. And he was going to come work for me at Hawkmoth before we opened. And the Bike Rack deal just kept getting bigger and bigger, and so he stayed with them, and that was all good. I thought he should have, as it was a better growth opportunity. So speed up 3 years. They're kind of looking to hone in on the next vision of their brand, and the ownership group. It was 5 owners who all have day jobs and sink their extra time into the brewery. They saw that they desperately needed an owner-operator, someone who can sit in the board meetings, but is also here 9 to 5 throughout the week, kind of managing
to literally what's happening in the back.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they kind of approached me in January of 2020, just a few months before the pandemic, and I thought the idea was so crazy that I had to entertain it. Like no one's ever done this. No one's ever. In theory, I guess on paper, it's two competing breweries in the same market. Although we're apples and oranges as to what we're doing style-wise, we're 12 minutes apart. No one's ever done this, but I'm intrigued by that also. If no one's ever done it, so the talks sped up pretty aggressively over the next 45 days or so throughout February, and then the pandemic hit in March, and both brands we're just like, what are we actually going to do over the rest of this calendar year? So the merger became a reality of this is a very healthy way to survive this. Everyone was scrambling. How are small businesses going to survive this? And
small businesses are always stronger together. I mean, I think that
turns out absolutely. You kind of shed some ego and say what is best for the business. And both brands felt that kind of joining all of our admin expenses and our resources would save enough money to offset the huge reduction in revenue of the pandemic. So we started operating as independent brands, but as one management group throughout the rest of 2020. Probably by like Q4, we were operating as one management group.
Okay.
And then we set up the legal documentation to make it official. And a little over a year in, and it was definitely the best career choice of my life. It has opened a lot of doors and created a lot of big stages that I never thought I would have had. Like Hawkmoth is intended to be a off-the-wall niche brewery, but it still feels really cool to walk into a Walmart and see a six-pack that I brewed. It was never intended to be Hawkmoth, and it won't be, but getting to achieve that with Bike Rack was pretty flattering. So,
yeah, absolutely. Well, very cool. So then, I got to ask you, you're kind of brought in to, like you said, hone in some of the flavors that they have here, some of the beers that are going. Is there one beer, I'm just going to be pointed and ask, is there a beer that, like, your first beer in the door, you were just like, okay, it's definitely going to be that one?
So I was given 100% creative control whenever I signed the documents.
They must trust you.
And people, don't fully understand that. Is what that means is all the way down to if I wanted to change the name of Bike Rack to something, I think I had the power to do it, right? Like they really felt that they could give me the keys to the palace.
Yeah. If you heard that big thunk just there, I'm not going to explain what that was. Anyways, go ahead.
So it wasn't so much a single product. It was, let's look at all of the products and let's change them all. Let's start to evolve understanding what the products are and where we want them to be in a year.
Yeah.
And so we started with
taking it from great to excellent.
Yeah,
really.
that was the goal of what works. Okay, let's make it work even better. And Slaughter Pen IPA is the #1 selling beer for this house. And so we wanted to figure out, well, how can we actually use more Citra hops in this beer while spending less on Citra hops, getting them on contract, and make their best-selling beer even better. So that was actually the first project. It wasn't taking the worst beer and making it better. It was taking the best beer and making it even better.
Yeah.
But at this point, 14 months later, we've overhauled everything.
Yeah.
So
when you overhauled, let's just talk Slaughter Pen really quick.
Yeah.
So how, first of all, if you're not familiar with Northwest Arkansas, they name a lot of their beers. If you hadn't told about Bike Rack Brewing, there's an amazing trail system here in Northwest Arkansas, perfect for tourism. Come check out the area, but not only stop in here at Bike Rack, but we've got some really awesome trails, and it's expanding constantly.
Every day. Yeah, I mean, I think we have, maybe you can comment, over 100 miles of paved trails within this county alone.
Yeah.
So think Aspen, think Asheville, North Carolina. It's maybe those trail systems on steroids, actually.
Yeah,
it's even better than those major markets are. When you have the pro riders of those towns flying here every month to come ride these trails, you've done something. And with Bike Rack Brewing, we feel like we are the beer of the mountain bikers of this area. Whether you're traveling in or you live here, we are the beer of that clientele, and that's a lot of fun because it's a pretty cool clientele.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of different traveling groups, events, organizations roll through here, and to think that you guys are primed right here, especially being right off the Greenway, I mean, it's a great spot to stop in. So, but thinking about the Slaughter Pen, when you reformulated, when you kind of tweaked it a little bit, did anybody notice? Were there some like longtime drinkers that are like, something's different here?
It's strange. Hops are kind of a magical ingredient that you can change the flavor and continue to boost the bitterness in a beer, and people can't tell the difference because hops overwhelm your palate. To whereas, so the short answer to that is Slaughterpin and all the changes, probably a 3-stage set of changes over the first 6 months or something, were all received really well. It was a gradual change, and so 6 months later, it was a different beer, but you can't even remember what the old one was at that point.
Okay.
It's the light stuff that if you add 2% more corn, someone's like, this beer tastes different. And so our Golden Ale has actually been the most talked about changed beer. It's not our number one seller, but the locals that do drink it have drank it every day for 5 years.
Okay.
And they're like, something is different in this beer because it is flavor stripped down and you notice all the subtleties about it. So
yeah,
it's been fun trial and error. It's been fun to hear feedback of your literal neighbors on the streets and say, they're like, oh, I liked this batch of Golden. What was the difference? And you explain to them, and they're like, okay, well, I didn't like these changes in this batch. Transparency is healthy.
I think that's really cool to see because I think that a lot of brewers have this idea that the general public doesn't want to get involved with the science of it or kind of the makeup of it. They just want to drink it. But I think it's really cool to see that you guys are involving your regulars and kind of that local community to where they can give feedback, and it truly does impact your beers in a very real way.
There are people walking in this tap room every day that simply have been drinking Golden more frequently and longer than I have.
Yeah.
So I want to listen to their opinion. That's like there's some wisdom in their words.
Absolutely. So looking at the board, you have one that's simply called beer. Tell me where that guy comes in. Was that your brainchild?
Yeah. So that was the first. All new product kind of introduced. I always wanted to brew a classic American lager.
Yeah.
But with the Hawkmoth setup, it's small, it's tight and limited space, and so lagers just don't make sense.
Because it takes a lot longer to brew a lager.
You're tying up tanks at least twice as long, sometimes 3 times as long, and just more finicky.
When you say classic American lager, what would you contrast your beer?
Coors Banquet, Miller High Life.
Yeah, buddy.
Those were the two inspirations of let's understand who drinks this beer, why do they drink this beer, why have they drank this beer for 30 years. Mm-hmm. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We are trying to make Bentonville's version of Banquet. So the story of why I'm so passionate about a 4% lager is surprise, I wasn't alive in the 70s in Golden, Colorado, but I want to imagine that if I was and I walked into the random watering hole down the street and Pete Coors was dropping off the keg, I want this to taste like that pint of authentic Banquet.
Okay.
I mean, Banquet now isn't what it was in the 70s. That's just how things evolve.
Yeah.
But I want to brew a true classic American lager, Bentonville's beer.
Yeah.
So the branding is clean and simple. It's 3 colors, blue, white, and gold. A classic ribbon style banner on the can, and beer in big letters. And then underneath it says classic American lager. But if you remember all the cans in the 80s, they all simply just said beer on them. It was to advertise what the product was. It is beer. And in the 80s, all beer was the same style of beer. So you didn't have to specify what the style was. It was beer. So, hey, let's just make things simple. Don't overcomplicate things.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I have had the beer, and it is wonderful.
It's a crusher.
It's a great lake beer. It's a great river beer. It's perfect for the golf course.
Yeah. It was our first beer that we put in 12 packs, and I felt that was pretty appropriate as this is a 12-pack style of beer. The price point's lower on it. It's intended to be cheaper to get in your fridge. It's just a classic American beer.
It's that lawnmower beer for sure, man. I love it. Love it. Well, let's go to commercial break really quick, and then after we get back, we will talk just a little bit more, and you'll see. All right. Cheers. Hey, y'all, it's the Beard Bros. So if you're listening to the Brew House, it's easy to say you probably love podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Well, have you ever considered starting your own podcast?
Huh?
If you have, maybe you're worried about how to get started. You're probably thinking you have to have a bunch of expensive recording equipment, editing software, a website, and a whole lot more, right? Wrong. Buzzsprout makes it super easy to start your own podcast, and right now you'll even get a $20 Amazon gift card just for signing up for one of their paid plans through the link in our show note in this episode. Not only does Buzzsprout make it super easy to start recording with just your smartphone, their extremely supportive team also has tons of guides to help you find the right equipment at the right price when you're finally ready to upgrade. Buzzsprout also makes it super easy to get your podcast listed in every major podcast platform. That includes Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, Spotify, and more. Pretty cool, right?
Wow.
Also with your paid plan, you'll get a great-looking podcast website, customizable audio players that you can drop into other websites, and one of my personal favorite parts, because I'm kind of nerdy like that, you get access to detailed analytics so you can see just how many people are listening to your podcast and how they're listening to it, and you get marketing tools to help promote your podcast too.
Perfect.
So what are you waiting for? Use the link in our show notes today and join the more than 100,000 podcasters that have already joined Buzzsprout and see how easy it can be. Cheers, friends.
You're listening to the Brew House, the podcast for beer lovers of all types. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to the Brew House. So with me today is Bradley Riggs from Bike Rack and Hawk Moth Brewing here. He started as a brewer. Now he's CEO of Bike Rack Brewing Company. That's insane, dude. That's super cool.
It's just a title on a business card that I don't even have business cards, so it's just a title actually. If that's the
You
case,
just like scribble it on a can, right?
I need to just start scribbling it on napkins for people.
Yeah. That could be fun. So we sipped a beer during that first part of the interview. What beer were we drinking there, man?
That was the Kavik Ipa Winter Edition, which it's a quarterly rotating Kavik style IPA, and the Winter Edition was a black IPA variant, which was really neat. I think it's one of the better black IPAs I've ever had.
Yeah.
And that yeast is fun. You ferment at over 90 degrees, and you add a lot of experimental tropical hops, and they just explode. So all of that put into if you look at the color, it is black like a stout.
Yeah.
That's a really cool beer.
Yeah, that was very dark, and I was kind of on that thought process of like, okay, how am I going to like this? What's the flavors going to come out? And it was super smooth,
citrusy and fruity, not roasty and heavy.
Yeah,
and that's hard to do. So we were pretty proud of that one.
That's super cool. Super cool. Well, let's talk really quick. So like, as you've kind of gone through, whether it's been at, your time at New Province, whether it's been at Hawkmoth or here at Bike Rack, have you done many like collaborations or anything like that with other brewers? How are you reaching out?
Yeah. So, I've got a decent story of collabs. It started, my first one, I went back and did a collaboration with New Province.
Okay.
And
as Hawkmoth?
Yeah.
Okay.
And 2 Rogers breweries, if as the crow flies, like 3.5 miles apart. It's
you could
close.
literally pour a beer, drive to your other location, come back, and you would still have good
Absolutely.
head on it,
So we thought it would kind of tell a story as well of, hey, we're all in this together. There's not any hard feelings. We actually ran back different variants of the beers called Second and Hudson. It changes every year. So we've actually ran that back a few times.
Okay.
The first year, the second year, we didn't get to it last year, but we'll get back to it this year for sure of doing the next edition of Second and Hudson. We did that. Let's see. Fast forward. I did a serious bucket list collaboration with Lost 40 in Little Rock. And I think it's the most unique collaboration idea I have ever seen. Maybe I'm biased, but we brewed 5 barrels of Beardegard wort at my place.
Okay.
Straight off of the boil kettle, we transferred it to chill it down and then kegged it. Didn't pitch yeast.
Okay.
Shipped the kegs to Lost 40 in Little Rock, and they pumped them into barrels and then added yeast.
So what was the vision kind of that you had going into that?
So the vision wasn't flavor focused; it was concept focused. Of start here, end there.
Okay.
So we brewed it here, and then they finished the fermentation and packaging there over a year and a half later.
Really?
And it was called Buddy System. It came out in October of 2020.
Yeah.
And it was just one of the most unique beers I've ever seen. I know the state of Arkansas was really proud of it as one of the smallest brands and the biggest brand from two different markets came together and made a true, once it's gone. You can't replicate this product. So I did that one. Whenever I opened Hawk Moth, I had set a bucket list of wanting to brew a collaboration with Great Raft.
Okay.
They're in Shreveport, which is about 6 hours south. I kind of have always circled them as the gold standard of regional brands.
Yeah.
As far as the states that touch Arkansas, I think Great Raft and Shreveport they're just kings.
So like if you could do one collaboration, that would be like one that you haven't done yet. That would be like your pinnacle right there.
So I did a collaboration with them. This is all a wild story. So I was able to go down to Shreveport and we brewed a Kavik IPA there. This would have been in August of 2020.
Okay.
That was a quick turnaround, probably like four weeks from brew day to releasing the packaging. But yeah, it felt really, really cool to have my brand and my name attached to Great Raft, who I respect a lot. Fast forward a little bit. I actually, in February of 2020, right before pandemic hit, I brewed a collaboration with Bike Rack. Before we had official merger talks, we brewed an Irish stout to kind of be the Benton County's St. Patty's go-to beer. That was just the focus. It's a community-driven beer for a specific weekend. The weekend ended up not happening, but the beer was still really cool. So
I had some of that beer, by the way.
Yeah,
it was absolutely.
It was
delicious.
just simply an Irish stout done well. 4.5%, super dry, a little bit of faint mint character, along with all the roasted chocolate of thank Guinness or any of that. So I did that. I've got to do one with 405. We talk about it every month and back and forth. And
where's 405 out of?
405 is in Oklahoma City.
Okay.
That one is going to happen at some point. It's just getting it on the calendar and following through with it. Yep. That one's going to happen. My ultimate collaboration.
Yeah, what's the crown on
Let's
top
go
here
back
for
to
you,
the
man?
source where the story of Hawkmoth all started, Portland, Maine.
Okay.
Oxbow.
Oxbow.
I think Oxbow, they are the most inspirational brand for what my passion and my styles are. Grisettes, Saisons, Beardigards, basically beards that are not popular. They're like, cool, we want to brew these, and they do them better than anyone in the world. So I think their owner, Brewer, I'm not sure exactly who this is. He's got Northwest Arkansas ties in some ways. So
I feel like
I'm going to push to make this happen that Oxbow, we're doing this.
Yeah. If you guys are listening, or if anybody out there knows some contacts at Oxbow, then reach out. Let them know that we got somebody who is ready and willing to.
Some of the first level gears have already started turning on trying to make that one happen, which would just be because I want to.
You're tweeting them every day, aren't you? Is that?
Yeah, something. I'm sending them TikToks every day.
Yeah, that's what it is. As long as they're not cringy like Jackson Mahomes, then we're good. But no, that's good, man. So Oxbow, that's really cool. Would you say there's one of their beers that really just like that was your catalyst for like, holy smokes, these folks really know?
I think they were the first brand that showed me like once it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
They have probably brewed it. They've probably been open for a decade, and I bet they've brewed maybe 1,000 different beers.
Oh, wow.
They just brew so much stuff that whenever you go, just get whatever the bartender recommends that you get and enjoy it and then move on. So I'd have to go back and see like what all I'd had, but they have a kind of their usually around flagship is a Farmhouse Pale Ale, but it is a sour saison, I would say. But they list it as a Farmhouse Pale Ale. It's I think barrel fermented, and you just get so much character so quickly in doing that. When you can find that bottle or draft, it's always 10 out of 10.
Okay.
So.
Now you make me want to go make a road trip. Let's do this.
Portland, Maine is a utopia.
I've never been.
It's before going there on my honeymoon, I had been to 46 states, and I was lacking Maine and Montana and the two obvious. And so we wanted to go to Maine, to kind of add 47 and to establish all new memories. I had never been there, so let's see what that place was about. And since then, I've gone back, and it really is a utopia.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, hopefully we can help make that happen here on the Brew House, because I would love to see that. And, when they come to town, you just got to call me back, and I'll come in here and do a podcast with you guys. So, all right, let's move on to, I think we're going to wrap up here, but I got a few random questions for you. These are rapid fire, so don't feel like you have to expand anything. You can tell as much or as little as you want to on these.
Okay.
So let's start out with what is your most treasured possession?
As far as a physical item,
yeah. I mean, that shirt's pretty sweet. So
this is a pretty cool
digging that one.
shirt. I think, as if we're doing rapid fire, first thing that pops in my head, whether it's right or wrong, I'm an avid coin collector, which is really nerdy and really strange.
I didn't know that about you.
I've got a few really cool coins, like a 1921 peace dollar. It's the coolest looking coin I have, and I think it's my most treasured possession.
I think that's pretty awesome. Okay.
I don't know. I'm sure if I put 4 minutes of thought into it, I'd come up with something real, but it was the first thing that popped in my head.
Brewing and coin collection. I love it. That's fantastic. She gave you a look, just so you know. Yeah. She did. So, when you die, what do you want to be remembered for?
I would like to be remembered as an individual who encouraged others. It's something that we can never do too much of, and I every single day fall short of, but I do want to be remembered as that, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
That's what I'm striving for. I fail at it miserably 9 times out of 10, but there's power in that. So,
well, and especially in today's climate, I think it's really, really exciting actually to encourage other people, because not a lot of people are doing it.
Yeah.
So be that difference, right?
I think so.
All right. Let's knock out like 2 more.
Okay.
So what, at this point, I know we talked about Oxbow, but if you had to say a person, is there a living person that you admire the most right now
in the beer industry? Is that what you're asking?
I mean, you could talk about our illustrious leader here.
I went beer industry. This being a beer podcast, I would love to, as far as like people goes, it doesn't count if you see someone and take a picture with them. To me, that doesn't count. Who do I want to have a beer with? So who can I get 30 minutes with and ask them questions like this that are either deep or super shallow and funny? I would love to have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale with Ken Grossman.
Okay.
He is all of Mount Rushmore. He's all 4 spots to me of OG craft beer. I would love to pick his brain of, there's no way 50 years ago he thought it would be this. There's just that's not a possible vision to have. 50 years from now, I want to be twice as big as any craft brewery in the world. Yeah. And that's what they are. Their quality has never wavered. They treat their employees well. He is a pretty inspiring dude that I would love to have a beer with. That's awesome.
I think that's a fantastic one. I said there was going to be 2 more. I think it's a great one to end on right there, because it's super cool to see the heroes that we have and how have they impacted our lives, but to see how their journey had been too.
I would be so curious, because he's done it all.
Yeah, which is kind of the reason, if you go back to it, why we're doing this podcast in the first place, is because you guys are all heroes of mine. I don't say that frivolously here, because I love beer, and I love the craft that you guys are creating here. And as the whole industry grows, it's just been really cool to see you guys come around, see the different flavors you can produce, the ways that you do collaborate, the ways that you do just re-engineer what we thought was possible with beer. And so I think that's really cool to see. And I look forward to seeing everything that comes out both here at Bike Rack or over at Hawkmoth, and any of your other future ventures that are coming.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. So, if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you on a regular?
The brand or me as an individual?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's say yes.
Social media, it's all there. Bike Rack Brewing, Hawk Moth Brewing, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I don't think we're doing TikTok and Snapchat yet, but who knows? By the time this comes out next week, that may be going too.
Yeah.
So it's not hard to find people or brands anymore. If you have any effort at all, you will find what you need to.
Yeah. Well, and I guess my last real question that I have for you is: will we see the Irish again this year? The Irish Red.
The Irish
like it.
Irish Red. Irish Red probably not. Okay. Irish Stout this year we won't. We did it in 2020 and 2021, and both St. Patty's were just not real St. Patty's.
Yeah.
So we kind of have a bad taste in our mouth associated with putting a lot of marketing effort into this beer that it's not the people's fault, but they just can't get out in droves and pub crawl and all that. So maybe when we're 100% free and clear, 2023,
all right,
we can circle back to it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us, Bradley. Appreciate it. And we will see you guys next time on the next episode of The Brew House. Cheers. Hey, thanks again for listening to this episode of The Brew House. I really appreciate you being here, and I want to give you the recognition that you so richly deserve for being a follower. So do me a quick favor, leave us a review here on whatever platform you're listening on right now, and at the end of each new episode, I'll be reading one or two of my favorites, so you might be able to hear your own review read soon. Thanks again. Cheers, friends.
You've been listening to The Brew House, a production of Remnant Media. Be sure to subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or your other favorite podcasting platform so you don't miss another great episode. Thirsty for even more? Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and even TikTok.